Here at JPL, it really depends on the mission, but if you look at, our long flagship missions, documentation is extremely important. So one, you're going to have a lot of people involved in the design process, so making sure that things are documented well means that you can effectively communicate that. Sometimes we call it a single writer, multiple reader problem. So instead of having to answer the same email 20 times, you write that down, you point people to that description, and everyone has kind of a consistent understanding of what's going on. Cassini has been around Saturn for 15 years. A lot of the engineers that were working on the design of the system aren't there to operate it, right? I mean, you're talking about generations of folks, generations of careers. And so having the documentation both during the design process and when you're kind of operating the system is paramount to make sure that you are really maintaining that quote-unquote institutional knowledge. So the architect on a project, I think their responsibility is to make sure that all of the systems understand kind of what their immutable properties are. So understanding what the overall system needs to do, what its immutable properties are, and then subdividing that to the various people that are actually going to develop the design of the system, so that once those individual parts are delivered, they're going to play well together and give you that overall capability that you need for your system. Your architect is going to influence your requirement set to make sure that if the systems are designed to meet your requirements, the overall capability is going to be there. They're obviously going to develop your high-level kind of functional diagrams and your kind of high-level interconnection diagrams. And that's important too, to make sure that you've identified the right boundaries for your different systems, and you've identified the way that they're going to communicate with each other. And so that way, if there's unexpected behavior, other things, that is a kind of controlled communication path and not just something you came up with at the last second. Another part of it too is maybe less concrete, but the architect sets the overall tone of the project and how the system is going to come together. They may work to set the overall tone of how you're going to do your requirements development or how you're going to do your functional decomposition and other things. And so sometimes that deliverable there is a plan or something like that, but really they're setting this tone on the project that, one, the architecture of the project is important. Two, that you shouldn't be thinking about, well, hey, what's the design right this second? Because early on in a project, the design is very fluid and it may change. And really what you want to be thinking is, what are the intrinsic characteristics of my system? If I have my design staying within those intrinsic characteristics, I'm okay, and I don't need to worry as much about, hey, okay, this point design is different from this point design. I've seen trades conducted in a lot of different ways. On Europa, we have a few different processes. We have actually a fairly rigorous process that we usually employ. The idea is, first, we explicitly identify the different options that we're going to consider, kind of poll the experts to make sure that we're not leaving anything out. When we choose those designs, we're trying to pick things that are plausible. We try not to cut things out too early and really take the time to investigate our different options. Then we basically try to evaluate the options on a predefined set of criteria. So that's something else that we try to kind of poll experts and other things on, is basically identifying a set of criteria that we're going to compare the designs on. So usually we think about their technical merits. We think about the risks involved with each of the options. We obviously think about the cost and the schedule and other programmatic considerations as well. One of the things that we do to kind of evaluate is we try to combine those different attributes that we talked about into single scores that we use to rank the options. Obviously, that can be problematic because depending on weights you give certain values can really affect your trade study. And so we obviously also run sensitivity analyses on the attribute weights to make sure that we weren't, just because we picked one of the values was 2 and one of the values was 3 was really what was holding us up, that there really are fundamental differences between the options. We have a lot of engineering experience on the team, and so there's kind of the gut check round, right? Hey, we're thinking option 1, does everyone think that makes sense? And then we make kind of a final conclusion based on the scores, the gut check and so forth, have a recommendation, have kind of a team buy-in on the recommendation and move forward.